All right, y'all. Welcome back to the channel. We have today an awesome special guest, Allison Morrow. How you doing today, Allison?
I'm good. How are you all?
Doing
Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to be discussing the Trojan horse of what is being called the TikTok bill, and this is very current. I know Tulsi Gabbard is all over social media right now, criticizing the bill and basically calling it just the Patriot Act's ugly twin sister or something like that. Maybe I'm putting words in her mouth, but this is very nefarious. Anytime there is bipartisan agreement almost on anything exclusively, it's usually pretty terrible. So welcome to the Uniparty. And what how's everything in your neck of the woods, Allison?
Talking about the Uniparty, I would call that my two kids. They work together to restrict my freedoms, but
Right.
That's hilarious.
but I love it. I love motherhood, but just saying that so everybody's aware, if you hear like a sucking sound or like farting or whatever, it's because there is a
Fill in the
baby
blank.
under the desk. So
Well, we have little ones that come in and out while we're
We actually have
broadcasting,
baby chicks in the
and
studio.
we have baby chicks in here
Oh,
too.
right in the
So we
studio.
have
So
lots
if
of,
you hear like tweeting or something,
yeah, if there's any
that's
tweeting
very
going
cool.
on.
That's so cool.
That's
We
the-
actually just saw our friend's chicks like an hour ago.
Okay.
We were visiting. We have friends who raise sheep, but they also do
Okay.
chickens, and they just got some chicks in. So my daughter was holding them ever so lightly. Well, here's the problem with 3-year-olds. You say, please don't choke them to death. And so then they open their hands and then they drop them on the
Drop
ground
them.
and kill them. You know, so it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, how do I explain the balance between not death grip, but also not dropping them?
Dropping
That's
them.
so true. So true.
It's not easy. But all's
That's-
well.
Yeah, that's
I do hear the
exciting.
chicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're here. There's it's a very exciting time. We have several incubators because chicks are the new silver. Okay.
That's so
So
true.
if you can't invest in silver, my good friend Chris at the Financial Prepper basically says the silver to chicken ratio is usually equivalent. So if you can't buy a silver round, buy yourself a hen. You'll have some eggs, and there you go.
Huh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I should have him on my podcast sometime
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, you should. He's good. They live in they're kind of like our neighbors. They're in Bossier, and
Oh, cool.
he's in
His
in the
channel's
know.
been growing really good now.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I guess what we can do is we'll introduce this article here. And this is on uncoverdc.com. And it says the Restrict Act, which first off, you got to love the title. Nothing speaks freedom better than the Restrict Act.
I mean, that just is screaming freedom right there. Right off the
They're
bat.
covering it up by calling it the TikTok bill, and they want to believe
Yeah.
China. What it says is another Trojan horse of government surveillance. The Restrict Act or TikTok bill seems to be the latest Trojan horse for government surveillance on America's. If you yearn for more terrifying government intrusion into your life, then the Restrict Act is the bill for you. Clue number one, this bill is poorly conceived and exemplifies dangerous government overreach with its endorsement by Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. And what Jake says down below here, this legislation would empower the United States government to prevent certain foreign governments from exploiting technology services operating in the United States in a way that poses risk to American sensitive data and our national security. The information and communication technology products and services supply chain is integral to the lives of Americans and the function of U.S. businesses. This bill presents a systematic framework for addressing technology-based threats to the security and safety of Americans. Now, what's ironic in all of that jargon is that they've been systematically destroying U.S.-based businesses and exploiting U.S. citizens. And we were just speaking before we started recording about how the way you destroy this terrible, evil enemy that you hate so much is to just become exactly like them,
Yeah.
and then you don't notice how terrible they are.
Yeah. Yeah. What do they say? Imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the weird thing about this, as you brought it to my attention by actually going through the bill right before we started recording this, is that I didn't even, if you hadn't told me this was the TikTok bill, I wouldn't thought it was the TikTok bill by reading it, because it doesn't even mention TikTok in like the first half of the bill. So to me, I'm kind of wondering, like, how did this whole TikTok bill thing come about? Because it's certainly not because the bill is just about TikTok. So somebody, some smart, evilly smart press agent with some one of our departments, one of our many departments that probably spends millions on communications, which we could talk
Right.
about that later, probably put this together to
Yep.
hose the media
And,
into regurgitating it, that it's the
right.
TikTok
And
bill.
yeah, and then this was probably written by the Rand Corporation probably 3 or 4 years ago, and they were just waiting for the right, crises
Yep.
to introduce it to the public. Because obviously, right, and then you have the Mockingbird media, the TikTok bill, the TikTok bill, the TikTok
Yep.
bill, and
Mhm.
it has absolutely nothing to do with TikTok, but it has everything to do with uh, making the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech non-existent in America.
Yep.
Like we're not censored enough on these
For real.
tyrannical platforms like YouTube and
Yeah.
everywhere else.
Well, it's one thing to have your income cut off. It's quite another to be thrown in prison,
Yeah.
right? So
Exactly. Yeah. And
so th-
and
yeah.
this article goes on to say, is this really about TikTok? Dubbed the
Yeah.
TikTok bill because of discussion over banning the app because of TikTok's ties to the Chinese Communist Party, the bill has very little to do with the Chinese controlled app. Instead, it lists a number of foreign adversaries who allegedly pose a national security risk.
Mhm. Right.
China is one of the named foreign adversaries. You always got to leave it big and broad and nefarious. Oh, it's hilarious.
Iran.
They're referencing the Patriot Act. This is cute. This is really thick irony.
Ugh, what a mess. Yeah, I mean, it's just sold to people like, well, come on, TikTok's mining your data for this evil purpose for the CCP. So who wouldn't want to just, well, I mean, I wouldn't, even if you sold it to me that way, I still I still wouldn't support it. But
Yeah.
they're totally falsifying what this bill is by reporting it that way. Because like I said, I mean, I haven't read the entirety of the bill, but I does it even say TikTok in it? I mean, I don't even know if it says
No,
TikTok in
I
the whole
don't think.
bill.
And here's the thing: like, if you inform everyone, right, what TikTok is doing, what they're doing, everybody look. So many sources have been talking about TikTok mining data and
That's what
doing
my
all this
daughter
stuff.
takes out of my purse.
TikTok,
Yeah.
you know,
Once
they've
again, going back to my foreign adversary, my uniparty that's trying to take me down, taking my Tic Tacs out of my purse.
life imitating life.
Yep.
I just had our producer was
Yeah, we had a
doing,
producer in here that was
messing with baby chicks,
messing with
and
baby chicks. So you had
Oh,
to run
and
them
then
nice.
somebody locked the door.
off.
Oh, no.
Locked
And
him in
I had
instead of
yeah,
locking him out.
They locked him
That's
in, and then
hilarious.
I had to pick the lock. That's what I was
Oh, no,
doing.
that's funny.
Oh
Oh,
man.
gosh. Yeah, my daughter one time when she was only 2 and she couldn't reach the handle, well, actually, no, she must have been able to just barely reach the knob because she locked herself in our bedroom, and there isn't like a, some they could put like a hanger in the hole and then
Yeah.
like
Yep.
push. It's not one of those, it's one of the turn ones. So the fact that she was able to do that and lock herself in, and I'm
Oh
thinking,
no.
how am I going to get this kid out of here? Anyway, thankfully she actually figured out how to do it. She's crazy. Again, we're talking about this, oh, and I hear her crying. Oh Lord, she must not like it that I'm telling the story. But my husband, because of his job he's done like a lot of stuff overseas and was in the military for a while, he knows how to break into pretty much everything.
Uh-huh.
And so he showed me like how he cut a piece of an aluminum can, and you can basically use that to get pretty much into any door, car
Yeah.
door, house door.
The Commerce Secretary has control over the list of foreign adversaries and does not have to notify Congress when he or she changes the list. Wow, that's
Whoa.
cool. Talk
That's
about
crazy.
now, here's legislation
Dang.
that is loaded with bureaucratic, non-elected nonsense. Why would any legislation allow any type of latitude. That is so fascistic, and that is unbelievable that that they can just arbitrarily change who's on the list. I- Any politician that would be even willing to consider this is totally insane. And this thing, and especially if you're a Republicard and you claim to be whatever, and you're giving this latitude one to your supposed enemy, the Biden administration, and they can completely modify and change this bill in real time, unabated, and without any political oversight. This is
And the thing is
wild.
I know what people are going to be like. This is what people are going to say, but they're they're infringing on our rights, and what they're doing on TikTok is they're harvesting all this data. Well, here's the thing, y'all. Here's the beautiful thing. Only like retards are on TikTok, and they're doing the weird boogie dance and stuff.
It's really true.
Okay, you're signing up for them.
Exactly.
It is all out in the open. When you go on there, if you read deep enough into their stuff that you were pressing the check mark on, it's going to say all this stuff, that they track your eyeball. Literally on TikTok, it just came out that they track your eyeball movement, and when they with their AI stuff, and they can see where your eyes are looking at on your phone. It's absolutely insane. But here's the thing.
Instagram's the same, by the way. But
That too. Well, they're all the same. That's
Right,
the thing.
they are all the
They're
same.
all the same. They all do the same stuff. It's not just TikTok here. So the thing is that they're like, oh, but they're stealing all of our data. Yeah, they're only stealing dum-dums data.
you called it Tic Tac.
I know. I like calling it TikTok
In the
because
room, I heard that.
there you go.
So
I got the
Al-
baby down for a nap too while we were
double
out there.
double.
So yeah,
You're
whoever invented popsicles, by the way, like whoever you are, wherever you are, popsicle inventor, thank you for your service.
you are defeating the Communist Party as we speak now.
Yeah, without you, we could not be doing this right now. Thank you
Oh,
to
man.
popsicles everywhere. I did not give one to the baby. I should just clarify, give one to the 3-year-old, not the baby. That would be hilarious. I just like left the baby with a popsicle. Like, yeah, I put him down for a nap, gave him a popsicle. Thank you.
Oh, man.
Allison, this bill allows the Commerce Secretary to adjust the list
Mm.
like arbitrarily. They're allowed
Oh,
to
Lord.
change the list.
Yeah.
And the fact that any Republicard would give this power to the Democrats is, I mean,
Mhm.
this is kind of hard to fathom, since they play this like hard and fast WWE act that, you know, they're arch enemies and all this stuff. It's just it's unbelievable. The
Yeah.
secretary may also create, keep, and revise lists of foreign persons, anyone who poses a threat to critical infrastructure. Oh
Mhm.
boy, like elections. Oh boy.
Right. Well,
Wow.
and isn't the way they often restrict your ability to do, I mean, or to be free, I guess, or to do business, to just act, have a free exchange of ideas or goods, is through the Commerce Department, because like
Yeah.
raw milk, for instance, one of the places I
Yeah.
learned about this, right? That's how they get you, because can't sell it over state lines, and because that's how the federal government gets its arm in there, is
Yep.
through
Yep.
commerce. And then it's like really what they've done is gotten their arm into your health, medical, all that stuff.
Yeah, our entire federal beast is completely weaponized against the public. And every time somebody talks about regulation, it just makes me cringe and shudder. Like, these people are
Mm,
just incompetent. We need to look no further than East Palestine,
Yep.
how they systematically
Yep.
polluted the world, and they're continuing that process.
mhm.
And now they're going to present the Tic Tac bill that has nothing to do with Tic Tac or
We should
TikTok.
let's rename it. It's the Tic Tac bill. The Tic Tac though company is, whoever owns them is not gonna like. I'm gonna look that
Yeah,
up right now.
they're gonna be
See if I
very upset.
care.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, I say this. I don't necessarily blame the government for trying to do this, because this is what they do. I
Yes.
think what disturbs me is how many people are going to support it
Yeah.
outside of the government, and are just going to be led to
Yep.
slaughter
Yeah.
willingly. That's the sad part. It's not that, somebody said to me once when my horses got out, horse is gonna horse.
Yep.
That's what horses do. Horse is gonna
Yeah.
do
Right.
horse. And
Yep.
like the government's gonna government. These
Yep.
authoritarians gonna
The
authoritarian. This is
beast.
what
Yep.
they do.
Yep.
But the sad part is how many people are gonna allow it.
Mm.
Right. And the way the checks and balances were initially set up in the government is the founders realized it was a beast and they wanted to chain the
Chain it.
beast. You know, they wanted
Yeah.
to chain, control, and restrain it. And, you know, since all of that's gone out the window and there isn't even like a two-party system, it's this uniparty system, and they play this good cop, bad cop thing.
Yeah.
And then when something totally dictatorial and tyrannical comes out, like, oh yeah, this is a great idea because China, you know,
Yep.
and it's just like, wow, that your antenna should go up whenever they're both
Mm.
in agreement on it and they both think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
There's
Mhm.
usually there's probably $1 trillion worth of funding with this thing. Usually there's usually loads of funding, and usually it is tyrannical. This bill authorizes the secretary and relevant executive department and agency heads to fully control any risk arising from your devices or your activity on the
Whoa.
internet
Mm.
in your own home.
Mm.
Cool. What could possibly go wrong with
Nothing
that?
at all.
Terrible.
It's
Yeah,
just
terrible.
it's total technical
Mhm.
digital tyranny. And it
And continue. Sorry. Didn't mean to
no,
cut you off.
it's just I mean it's so vague that they can literally make it whatever they want. It's like tyranny Play-Doh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think what a lot of people they'll wince at because we'll sound like we're just being too hard on them and come on, they
Yep.
wouldn't do that to us.
Yep.
But you know what? Even if you err on the side of just incompetence, which
Right.
every single person who is willing to look at history must admit that the government is plagued with incompetence and just getting things wrong, making mistakes. Okay.
Mhm.
Say they're all well-meaning people, but they just make mistakes because that's what humans do. Why would you want to give somebody who makes mistakes this kind of power over your life? Like why would you want
Exactly.
a fallible person to have? I mean, this is like God territory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
And I think this is the whole point of one, freedom, and two,
Yeah.
if you educate people on TikTok, right, and what they're doing and what it's being used for, then you have the freedom to use it. If you want them to farm all your data and sell all your data to the
Yeah.
communists and you want to be a communist, go for it.
Go
You have
nuts.
the
Mhm.
freedom to do that. It's great. And then anybody that cares and anybody that wants to educate themselves and make a free market decision can make the decision like, nah, I'm not really down with TikTok or the CCP or all of that stuff. So I am going to opt out. And then the government doesn't even have to be involved.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm. Right, and what rarely gets brought up too in a lot of these discussions is just how I hate to tell you, but our government's already doing all this stuff that they
Right.
don't want these
Yep.
other governments to do. So
Yeah.
the idea that they try to sell this like as privacy, we're protecting your privacy, we're protecting your data.
It's always
Just
the direct opposite of what they say it
right.
is, what they're trying
It's
to
true.
accomplish.
And
Yeah, confession through projection, as Vivo
Mm.
says.
and the more you read it, Restrict Act Section 3. What kinds of virtual and otherwise devices are fair game, you ask? Any and all. The list is comprehensive. It includes
Oh my
e-commerce
word.
sites, payment technologies,
Mm.
online marketplaces, biotechnology, synthetic biology, post-quantum cryptology,
Mm.
quantum key distribution. I don't even know what half of that stuff is. And more. So in case,
And more,
I
yeah.
mean, they leave no stone unturned. All these 10,000 page bills they write that you have to pass before you know what's in it are so broad and so vague, they can mold it and manipulate it into whatever they want.
Yep.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's how it works. I saw the commissioner of public lands here in Washington who is gonna run for governor next year, and she also was my boss after I quit TV news, and she fired me over my podcast for undermining her vaccine mandate, she said, even though I said I have a First Amendment right to continue, you're a government official and I do it on my own time, but she didn't care. But I just saw that she tweeted about Trump, which has nothing to do with public lands, but thanks for letting us know what you think about Trump. That
Right.
she's so glad that the laws of our land are being applied fairly and without bias, because no one is above the law. And I retweeted her and I was like, that's hilarious. I mean, I basically said, this is shaking my head. If they were applied fairly and without bias and no one was above the law, then like you and everybody else in Washington State would be held accountable for violating our rights over the last several years. So they
Yeah.
just
Yep.
have like their heads in the clouds. They're total, I think in a lot of ways, like just they're useful idiots for even more powerful people. But the ego is not your amigo, as somebody once said to me when I was interviewing them. And it's very easy to use a narcissist to get your job
Yep.
done. And a lot of these people are attracted to these positions, I think, because they're extreme narcissists. They have major
Yeah.
egos. They're probably deep down very scared inside, very insecure,
Well,
but
I
they feel
think of
powerful.
Trump, and Trump's tweeting. No, I'm sorry. He's posting on Truth because we have Truth. He's like protest, 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 and I'm like, here's some steep irony, right? So you had a
Mhm.
bunch of people that peacefully protested for you on January 6th that have been locked up ever since, and with all of your ability and influence, he has done absolutely nothing to get any of those innocent people that have been rotting in
Mhm.
prison for like 3.5 years now.
Mhm.
He has done nothing. And then he's like, oh, but now these bogus trumped up charges that will amount to nothing. He gets to be the people's champ and do a perp walk, so that he
Mhm.
can be the people's champ, and magically somehow elections will be fair and balanced
Mhm.
again in
Mhm.
2024. But he wants people to protest now that it's weaponized against him, while his previous
Mhm.
supporters have been rotting in jail for
Right.
3.5 years. This is
And
some
still are.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's weaponized against him, and he didn't even get handcuffed, I don't think, right? They didn't even
Nope.
use handcuffs on
No.
him.
Yep.
Yeah, listen, I got into this world, into this podcasting world and this alternative media world right around the 2020 election and, COVID and everything, and I was very naive about a lot of stuff, and I used to tell people that they were overthinking it, I guess, when they thought stuff like somebody was a plant or, and
Hmm.
I get that sometimes too. Like, I do think
Sure.
sometimes people are like, oh,
Yeah.
you're CIA. I'm like, yeah, I'd make a great CIA agent, let me tell you. But, but when I, when I start really like, because I don't have any real attachment to Trump or really, frankly, I mean, sadly, the political system in this country, I just don't have a team.
Sure.
So when I look at him, my brain now versus where it used to be like 8 years ago, thinks what a perfect storm for like this guy to enter who without the phenomenon of him, like not just him, but the phenomenon of him, like without that, we would have had a very hard time getting to where we are right now with the idea that insurrectionists and threats to democracy and Joe on Facebook all need to be reined in for national security threats, right wing extremism, all this stuff. I mean, it came through in the era of Trump, and so some people may say that was just an organic thing, and maybe it was. But me, in my like darker moments, I think, you know,
Who signed
was
the
this
Patriot
all on
Act?
purpose? Was
Yep.
did he like on a purposeful plant
Yep.
for people who, a lot of the stuff that he said, I think, did resonate with people and probably was true, but that's the problem with a lot of lies is that they throw a lot of truth. As those of us who went to divinity school and read a little bit about the guy with the red horns, who's I don't think that's exactly how evil works, but the story of Satan is that he was a fallen angel, right? And
Yep.
that he just
He's the
wanted to be
father of
God.
lies. Yep. And I
Exactly.
believe that's how this conspiracy works, because uh, uh we're Christians, and we believe and follow the Bible, and the father of lies. People always say, "Oh yeah, but how can you think that this uh group of 300 people are controlling all this stuff?" No, I believe theologically that Satan is the prince and the power of the air, and he controls all this stuff, and that's how it works in concert. And what we've seen in American history is that tyranny advances under conservative control, right? Who passed the Patriot Act? George Bush, right? That
Hmm.
staunch conservative. Who destroyed and eliminated the gold standard? Richard Nixon, and it's like every time any large tyrannical move takes place, and Trump has been the perfect chess piece to just bring in the tyrannical total control. And the Trump regime has created this TikTok bill. I mean, this the whole premise, and then he'll keep saying China, 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 just to build on the boogeyman aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I don't even know if you necessarily need to convince me that he's like in on it to get me to the spot where I'm very concerned about really the state I think we're in, where we have these heroes now that we will follow blindly to our death and just get very mad at the person who tells us otherwise. And the one thing I think there are very few things I agree right now with a lot of the reporting that's being done by my old industry in corporate news. That's tea. I know you like tea. is that this just thinking that just because you're a journalist, just because you're a journalist. Sorry, you guys, we're all sick.
No, this is it's fine.
Just because you're a journalist, you're saying something wrong, like we hate you, and take away journalists, it's somebody else. Just because you're a libertarian, you're a Democrat, or you're Chinese or whatever. Okay, Lily, it's my show right now. That's what I tell her sometimes. It's my show. Hang on a second. Okay.
Or just because you state a fact, right? That makes you my enemy because you point out a fact and the fact doesn't agree with some preset narrative. So that makes you like the bad guy or something.
Yeah. I mean, like the whole fake news thing, I think in a lot of ways they deserve that title. On the other hand, it's like every once in a while they do say something that's true, but no one will ever listen to them anymore because it's just like, and they brought it on themselves. I'm not saying that. It's just that I think it's part of the system that we're now all in, where we can't list in my opinion, people can say some right things and they can say some wrong things. They can do some good things and they can do some bad things. I don't see any person as all good in any way. Like, in fact, I just as a pastor of mine used to say, there's a good God and there are men. That's it. Like, there's no such thing. I don't say he's a good man or he's a good woman. I just think there's men and women and there's a good God. That's it. And you should expect that somebody's going to say something wrong or do something wrong at some point, and not be terrified or so upset about that because the inverse of that is that we refuse to see. If you're going to be so rattled by somebody doing something that you don't like, then you're on the inverse of that more likely to worship them. Like, everything that they do is going to become so much more filled with meaning than just the action itself. And then you've got a lot of change blindness when things go in opposite direction. Like what you said, I mean, a lot of people have forgotten about those folks. And because, like I said, we're in this world where maybe, I don't know, I mean, I'm only 40, so maybe this has been like this for a while, but it just seems a lot more polemic. And there's a lot more hero worship than I remember there being. Like, it used to be that a lot of us could like come together with the idea that politicians were kind of trying to screw us. But now it feels like you'd say that about your enemy's politician, but not yours. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's very hyperbolic.
Else's, but not yours now. No, mine's not like that.
I think that's why most people are politically homeless, and they're just like, look, I don't have a party that I support, and I barely support even many individuals because they'll say and do some good things, but then they'll do some incredibly nefarious things, and you'll see some funding that they're getting, and they're just like, it's like super red flags. And that's why we get our children involved in just being aware of the paradigm and different things to kind of want to break the cycle, the propaganda cycle of the mainstream news and narrative and the government school systems and all that stuff. This has been a really long play, and that's how it's unraveled so fast. It's such a long play with the Prussian model and the government school model, we've all been kind of dialected into this, uniparty thing, and the good guys and the bad guys, and you just have to
Mhm.
kind of pick your team. If you're a blue collar, you're a Democrat, and if you believe in like free market capitalism, you're a Republican kind of thing.
Right. Well, I think you want to tell everybody what you think? I think the the parenting side of all of that probably comes even earlier than teaching about the system and teaching your kids that you and I'm not totally sure exactly how to do this. So if somebody has an idea, let me know. But teaching your kids not what to think, but how to think, and specifically even about you, like how to raise them to see you as an authority, but not an authority that it's like I just follow because because I have to, because you're gonna beat me or whatever. Because I don't know, because they can see you as the human being you are, like the fallible human being you are, but still understand what authority is. I mean, that to me is like the hardest part of parenting, because I do believe that when you grow up idolizing your parents, or inversely, you hate your parents, like they were terrible, and you just carry this resentment with you for the rest of your life, you are incapable of seeing the world the way that it is. You can't see the complications in the world. That's why you end up having heroes and villains, because it really goes back, in my opinion, to how you see your parents.
Yeah.
And so it's like, for me, man, how do you raise a kid to understand authority? Because it's important to have authority, I
Yeah.
think, and structure for a kid.
This
But
is
on
a
the other hand,
This is
yeah.
the perfect segue, Allison, because we are rolling out a parenting course and a young
Woo.
man's course. And we talk about all those specific subjects that you talk about, and creating relationships with your children and raising adults instead of raising children. And a lot of it is uh, expectation. And if we treat our children, obviously when they're little, it's a little bit different, but there's so much they understand so much more than we give them credit for.
Oh my
So if
gosh, yeah.
yeah, so if we start treating them in a more equal way when they're younger,
Mhm.
they respond in kind of that. They mature quicker, they learn
Mhm.
faster, and
Mhm.
a large part of that training is, hey, your parents are human. We make mistakes, but when we make the mistake and we recognize it, we repent of it.
Yeah, yeah.
We ask for forgiveness,
Yeah.
and the concept of repentance and forgiveness is, the point of repenting is to not do it again. It's not just like, well, I'm going to have this personality flaw, right? And I'm going to scream at you, and then I'm going to say I'm sorry, and then tomorrow I'm going to scream at you again and say I'm sorry. And because
Yep.
you're teaching your child that um that repentance is phony, and that saying that you're sorry is just words. and
Mhm.
and that's what really starts that building of that relationship, so that you can then continue to train,
Mhm.
rear, guide, and direct them
Mhm.
without this hatred, or where they despise you, or hey, when kids get Matt's age, right? Hey, from 17 to probably 28 or 32, I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. I mean, I thought
Right.
I knew absolutely everything,
Yeah.
and pretty much everybody else was an idiot. And then once you get mature, you're like, wow, I'm really borderline retarded.
Yeah. Yeah. I was so, like, I don't even know what you would call it. I guess liberal. I feel like liberals are not very liberal, so I don't know what to call myself. But back when I went to seminary, I went to BU, so it's very, very like arch crazy liberal school. Like
Hmm, hmm.
not even like I would say like the people who would be on like the left that I've had on, who are critical of like DEI stuff, and like
Yeah, wow.
that's what my
Yeah.
school's all about. So they wouldn't agree with it, and they would
Wow.
still say they're on the left. So I don't know how to characterize it anymore,
Uh-huh.
but just like the neoliberal, I guess,
Hmm,
DEI, critical race theory
hmm.
type of school. And it was just
Wow.
the beginning of it. And yeah, so I mean, I used to say that you had to call Jesus Jesus so you could be a
Mm,
feminist.
wow.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
dude. I
total
was, yeah.
postmodernism.
Oh,
Post
100%. Yeah,
postmodern,
we're
post-truth.
and very proud of it. Postmodernism and very proud of that.
Wow.
The Enlightenment was a terrible thing according to
Hi.
my
Hi.
university.
Hi.
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 Are you gonna have live stream someday?
Hi.
The other thing I wanted to point out in the Restrict Act is FOIA exempt, right? Penalties for things the government doesn't want you to do can be between 250,000 or up to $1 million
Mhm.
and imprisonment
Wow.
for not more than 20 years or both. So they'll bankrupt you and throw you in prison.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just
And
terrible.
yeah, it is. This is ultra tyranny. This thing is just like as tyrannical as it gets. This bill seems to be another Trojan horse meant to usher in more government surveillance of Americans. And that's what's crazy. I mean, it's already the surveillance is already I mean, it's so pervasive and so open-ended and generic as it is. Like they don't even need, if TikTok is genuinely a national security threat, perhaps a more focused ban on TikTok is in order. Or maybe Americans should just make better choices without the government intervening.
Mm-hmm.
What a fantastic way to wrap up the concept of this TikTok bill is just how about let freedom, allow people to make educated decisions, provide people with the information, and allow the freedom for individuals to make their own
Yeah.
choices, take personal responsibility. It's fascinating. It's fascinating how
Yeah.
so many people want to default to the government has to do something. It's so insane.
Well, yeah, because they're just like, oh, but people won't. Like that was how the government sold all of these COVID rules because people are like, well, people won't stay home or people won't do
Yeah.
this or they won't do that. So we have to force them because we're scared. And they're going to do the same thing here. I guess I just once again I go back to the fact that everyone. Okay, yeah, it's true that people are going to make mistakes. Okay, and yeah, all right. So there may be some nefarious behavior online. Okay, but you think that this is like a free from that if you go with the government side of things. I mean, that's why it's like you're taking a risk either way. It's not a risk-free decision to let the
Right.
government make the decisions and take the control. It's risky to do that too.
Take
So then you
take
have to ask,
COVID. Yeah,
yeah,
take COVID, for example. Right now, if we fast forward to 2023, and if you watch a montage of all these jackboot cops like suplexing people and body slamming them because either they
mhm,
didn't have a face mask on, which we know now doesn't work, or they weren't 6 feet apart, and you just watch these montages of like cops DDTing like 89-year-old old ladies and old dudes, like
Yeah.
body slamming them, suplexing them, and you're just like, wow, what a bunch of thugs. Like, you are just thugs. I mean, it's just like the mafia, because now they had absolutely no ration, reason, or logic for like totaling these people out because they didn't have a piece of paper on their face.
mhm. But going back to our discussion about like the team sports that we're all playing right now, how many people who are concerned about the police brutality in black neighborhoods were talking about that?
Yep.
So it's like okay if a cop beats the crap out of your enemy,
Yep.
Mm.
Exactly.
and that's how a lot of this stuff gets snuck in. It's just we'll keep you safe from this person you're so scared of, but but the thing that a lot of people also don't think about is that because right now we don't live in a monarchy, but even if we did live in a monarchy, eventually the monarch dies and a new monarch comes.
Yeah.
So you have to, it's a pretty good bet, I should say. You don't have to believe this, but it's a good bet that you'll have somebody who at some point you don't like in power, and you've just given them the reins to control your life. Like, why would you want to do that? It's not like just because your person's in charge. Okay, great, fine. Maybe they implement this the way you like it, but you've just given, like, if you don't like George Bush, the next George Bush, like he's going to be able to use this, or
Yeah.
you don't like Barack Obama, like the next Barack Obama, he's going to be able to use this.
Yeah.
So you just pave the way for your enemy of sorts, your ideological enemy, to have this power over you. Why would you want to do that? And yeah, like, again, life is risky. Like, there is just risk to life, and there's risk to all of this, government, republic, kids, like homesteading, whatever. Like, there's always going to be some kind of risk, but how much control do you want someone to have over your life that has no vested interest in your life, really? I mean, they don't have your best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And so you're giving them the ability to make very serious decisions about your life without even knowing who you are, or
Mm.
really even caring who you are. And I just think that this TikTok bill, I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation for me, because I really did believe it was first it was about TikTok, and I definitely I don't understand, other than like the propaganda arm getting this out as the TikTok bill. It does
Yeah.
not make any sense to call it that, like, at all.
And it really comes down, liberty and freedom over security. And every time that security is touted, it's always about limiting or you just totally incinerating freedom. And all the meanwhile, you get no security from it, right? You get
Mhm.
insecurity, you'll get fined, you'll get muzzled, you'll get censured, you'll get electronically vaporized.
Mhm.
And there's no safety in it. And the only thing that is the only casualty is freedom and liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that, kind of scares people. Probably scares more people than we think, who just, I don't know, still, I mean, I guess even if you don't necessarily believe the government's like here to help, I think a lot of people, just like I used to, just don't think it's that big of a deal. And
Yeah.
that's another way it's sold. It's like, yeah, all right, I understand it's probably not the best thing, but
This is
it's not
what
gonna be
politicians
that
do.
bad.
Yeah, and that's
Like with
where
COVID.
that's
Same thing.
really
I think.
where yeah, that's I mean, we have a litmus now that we can point to that's relatively fresh in most people's mind. We can point back to that, but
Mhm.
look what happened with COVID, and look how they're backtracking now. Look how even these platforms like YouTube that would vaporize people, right, for misinformation and disinformation that were telling the truth, and now everybody's allowed to say what people got vaporized for 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And now everybody, it's part of this postmodern revisionism. How do you
Yeah.
revise history in real time? You censor and electronically vaporize everybody, and then you allow the narrative. You slip the narrative back into the stream of consciousness of the masses, and it's like, oh no, that never happened. It's like it's very it's pure propaganda.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's textbook propaganda. And that, it's more proof that we are in a incredibly fascist, much more, well, communist, but much more fascist society. And the things that actually made America great and flourish have been undermined in my estimation and opinion since the Civil War, and the more perfect union as the states were deconstructed, and the more perfect union federal beast was amplified times 1,000. um, we destroyed this country when we destroyed state sovereignty, and that was fully facilitated by the Civil War.
It's interesting. I never thought about that. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we were talking about COVID being the most recent example, but there's still a lot of people who don't think anything went wrong with COVID. I was just in
I know.
Florida,
Yep.
as you guys know, because you were on
Fascinating.
my podcast while I was in Florida, and I started talking to these Canadians from Ottawa, where the trucker protest was. This huge trucker protest was, like, in my world, that was what a lot of people were talking
Mhm.
about. And I said, "Oh, that's where the trucker protest was," and they said, "Yeah, we still don't know what that was about." I'm like,
Wow.
"Oh." So I think you have to try hard. Who was it?
Mm.
Ben Franklin, I think, he said, like, it's easy to be ignorant, but you have to try hard to be stupid, or vice versa. It's easy to be stupid,
Yeah.
but it's hard. You have to
You have
try
to
to be
try
ignorant.
hard to be yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
So
true.
yeah, I mean, there are people out there who just think that this whole, like, just much ado about nothing, that there's nothing to worry about. And I
Wow.
think that's probably, that may be the most dangerous perspective from, like, being brainwashed and then led to your death of your own freedom. Because the person who I think is just like, no, COVID is so dangerous and we have to, I mean, I think that person at some point you could probably show like it's not dangerous, or it's not what you think, in the same way, like it's not a 50% death rate, or even if it was, like, okay, let's have a conversation about what the best ways to deal with this instead of just knocking everybody off the internet and refusing to have debate. I think the person who just has kind of like a malaise about it, who's just sort of lackadaisical, who's been told that it's just no big deal, just keep going on with your life and don't pay attention, I think that person is in the most trouble. Because like, how do you tell someone that your house is on fire when you've been told that that's just somebody cooking steak?
Mm,
There was just like, it's because
yeah.
eventually the person who goes, no, there's no fire. Well,
Right.
eventually, like, it's gonna get hot enough, they're gonna be like, okay, that's right, there is a fire, I feel the fire. But the person who's like, yeah, it's a fire, but it's just steak, they're just cooking steak, that person's a lot harder to convince, because they have found a reason to diminish and minimize what's going on, and it's very difficult to, I think, get that person to care.
Yeah.
And that's why we try so hard to put this information out there. It's definitely not doom and gloom. I mean, the reason that we relocated and homestead and do everything that we do is because we choose to be proactive. I mean, when you look at the Mr. Nah stuff that they're putting in food now, and that's going to be like this month as they roll out the mRNA stuff, and there's a Missouri bill that's opposing and fighting that. But the reason we started wanting to grow our own food 8 years ago was because of different information that you get about glyphosate or whatever, DDT, or fill in the blank of whatever chemical. And you're like, you know what? One solution is like, write your representative, vote harder, vote for the other team, or all this stuff. Or what you could do is you could start to practice to grow your own food, right? And that's right now relatively unencumbered by any political movement right now. I'm not saying that it'll always be the case. So, but that's something that you can do, and it's something real, and you can um, do that in real time, and the beat will go on and the politicians will do what they do. But you can actively and proactively build a better life, inside the system
Mhm.
that we currently have. And by doing that, you're illustrating to others, this is what's possible. This is what, anybody can do. And you're being an example, right?
Mhm.
It's all about being the change, and, taking positive steps to do what you can do, while all this other stuff, all this crazy stuff just kind of goes on around you. Um,
Yeah, and you can actually say I know something with confidence, because I think the more I'm on the internet, the more I'm like, I just don't know if this is true or not.
sure.
Everyone's getting very upset about it, but I just don't know if it's true. And that's a perspective, I think, sometimes in alternative media that people get really mad at you for. Like, well, what do you mean you don't know? Like, why aren't you angry? And I'm like, I just don't know. But when you grow a garden, and you choose the soil, or you're the person who's doing the cover crop or whatever, like you raise the animal, you're you're participating to the best you can and being confident that what you're saying to be true. And I've realized more and more there's just very few things that we can absolutely know are true,
Yeah.
and they're very close to home.
Yeah.
So if you're like not talking to your grandma over something that's being debated in New York City by news anchors who probably have no idea what they're talking about, I think that's detrimental to your life, your families, your communities. And I think, like, my parents, even though I was in TV news, they they canceled their subscription to like cable news. All they have is like movies now. So
Yeah. Right.
they're like a lot less stressed out and a
Yeah.
lot less divided. And so, and not to say that, I mean, I people are, we should be unified, like you brought up. I mean, I don't think that. I think, if there's a necessary reason for division, like, I get it, push back.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think a lot of the stuff we're divided over has been intentionally marketed, so that we won't
Propaganda.
have real relationships with people that we otherwise could mount a mighty force to stop some of this stuff. And so it's like, well, wasn't your grandma a hippie? I don't talk to my grandma anymore.
Yeah.
Well, you guys could actually, maybe she protested Vietnam War or DDT or whatever, but you don't talk to her anymore because she didn't want to get the shot, or you didn't want to get the shot, or
Yeah.
whatever. And I don't know. It's just unfortunate. So that's again, it's just, I look at our lives now, and the more time I spend just involved in our family's existence, the more confident I am in like the things I talk about, I know to be true, like, because I'm talking about this stuff because this is what I'm doing the most. And, the other stuff I go on my podcast and I learn about and I go, that's interesting. But am I going to like stake my life on it? Most of it, no, because I just don't
Right.
know. At the
Sure.
end of the day, I just don't know.
Yeah. And so that brings us full circle here as we wrap up. We control what we can control, be aware of what's going on, and get perspective and get different perspectives. And certainly, the last American vagabond, he says, question everything. And I believe in a logical, rational society in mind, we should question everything, right? And then you take what's being presented, you take your fundamental um, uh, ideologies that you have. And if you're a Christian, our fundamental foundation is the scriptures, and we use that and we hold everything else up to that and measure it to that. That's our objective standard that we have. We use that to analyze everything else. And that is, and then you do what you can do, you control what you can control. And it's very gratifying, satisfying, and it's a fulfilling life. And then in turn, what happens is you raise individuals like that can go forward and go on. And if progress is to be made, it can happen, versus just like a screech culture with like multifaceted hair that's uncertain of what chromosomes they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were driving. Oh man, it was probably almost a year ago. It was last summer. Yeah. So like almost a year ago. And so Lily was just a little bit older than 2. And this guy, so I was coming out across the street. I was coming out of one business and he was coming out of another business. And so it's like, we kept being like, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go, no, you go, doing that thing.
Mhm.
So we both need to turn. And I said, come on, dude. And she goes, yeah, come on, dude. Like, she like knew 4 words at a time. And then those became 5 and 6, like, or 7, I guess. Come on, dude. So I'm like, wow, you can say something one time
Just like that.
and they pick up on it like, what? Like her stuffed animal that she has with her all the time. My husband got it for her at the airport because he travels all the time. And I didn't even know she knew that. Like, we don't sound like we talk all the time. Like, okay, remember how we got this at the airport? Our daddy got this at the airport. He loves you. He travels, but he brings back, Chaka from the airport. And yes, just one day she goes, this is Kaki. Daddy got me at airport. And I'm like, what? How did you even know that? I mean, we must have
Yeah.
said that maybe one time. Like one time,
Yeah.
probably he said it to me like, oh yeah, I got that at the Minneapolis airport. And then she just heard us talking about it. Yeah, they totally model your behavior. And
Mhm.
that's what, it's funny. I was talking to one of my old bosses the other day, and he was telling me about how smart his kid is. God love him. He was, just going, oh yeah, she's, she's testing out of high school, even though she's in 9th grade. She's basically doing college work, and they can't even like analyze how smart she is because she's like off the testing charts and all the, And I said, well, she has smart parents. And he goes, oh yeah, I mean, she got to sit on the sidewalk cafes of Paris when she was 8, and she's had, I'd like to think we gave her good experiences. And I said, well, my daughter sits under my desk currently right now. Well, I talk to conspiracy theorists. I mean, and I say that lovingly,
Yeah.
And I mean, I was kind of joking. Hang on a second. And he goes, well, yeah, maybe you don't want to do that, because for him, that was like nuts that I would involve my kids in listening to these discussions. But I hope she just sees somebody who is inquisitive and curious, but able to, push back if something doesn't sound right, but also listen and not come across as somebody who's like a total know-it-all, who's unable to be corrected, or just somebody who's learning and also willing to talk to anybody. I mean, I get a lot of flack for that because like some people in my audience, they only want to hear from a certain kind of person. Like
Mhm.
the guy who I do my weekly show with, I think he's a little bit more mainline than I am. And he has this whatever the opposite of a fan club is. He's got that. And I'm like, what's wrong with, my debating this guy in the show? Like we have, spirited conversations about stuff. Like what happened to that? Because it happens on the other side too. The whole cancel culture. Like I don't want to talk to this person. I mean, yeah, everybody's doing it, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in just being willing to talk to folks and hear how they think. And then when it comes to the people, especially who you're not supposed to talk to, I hope my kids pick up on that, mom was willing to listen to society's complete rejects, those who are totally ostracized from society, whether it be from their jobs or from being able to go to a restaurant, whatever, and didn't fear what they tell us nowadays we're supposed to fear by associating with somebody
Mhm.
who's been labeled an extremist or whatever the dirty word is, the leper of Jesus's time.
Yeah.
And that I will listen to you. I'm not doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you, but I will listen to what you have to say. And I just absolutely just refuse this idea that somehow if you associate with someone nowadays that you're
Guilt by
you're
association. Yeah.
yeah, guilty by association. Like that's like the only thing we had, I guess. I don't know if we have it anymore, but that's like the thing that made us America, was our ability to associate with people and freely associate with people. And to take that away, to tell people that not even necessarily to do it by law, but to do it by their own
Proxy.
desire, because you've made
Mhm.
them so paranoid about their own neighbors that they take away their own freedoms willingly. I mean, and they don't want to associate with each other. It's not even like you need Gestapo to do that. People are just, they've been so brainwashed to believe this, that like somebody who went to the, January 6th rally or just any number of things, like that you can't associate with them publicly. Otherwise, the guillotine for you too. And I think that requires, like, you have to, as you guys have mentioned, I mean, I say all the time, like, my identity comes from God and God alone. Like, you can't, what's the verse of Jesus says, it's not what goes into a man that makes him unclean, but what comes out of him, right? And
Yeah.
it's like God has determined my identity. So there's nothing that can happen to me when I associate with you. There's no, like, you can't hurt me. You can't hurt ultimately what I care about, which is my soul. Like there's just no way for you to take that away. And I think maybe that's partially what's missing from a lot of our discussions nowadays, is that we've traded our souls for our ego, and we
Mm.
think that's real. We think the ego is real, and we follow that instead of understanding that this life is just a glimmer, and it's our soul that we should care more about. And that if you know God, you don't have to worry about associating with even the most, let's say, legitimately evil person. Like I've sat with murderers before, and I think, like, again, going back, I think everybody is on the same plane in God's eyes. But let's just say somebody who's done something like that, like, oh my God,
Mhm.
somebody who's, we could all agree, like, that's not a good thing. We don't
Mhm.
want to just like go murder our, kid. I've talked to, I've done stories on that. Um, but you can sit with a person like that because, well, I hate to say this, God loves them too. And also your identity is not wrapped up in what they say or how they act with you or what they've done or any of that stuff. And, like I said, unfortunately, we've been sold this fake bill of goods that it is that we are endorsing or in some way identifying, like our identity is wrapped up in the conversations we have, what we tweet about, who we talk to, all this stuff. And it's just, I wish people wouldn't buy into that, because it is like the big lie. It is a very big lie. And it's not just a temporal lie. I truly believe that's like a spiritual lie, because it makes you believe that all these things that you're so scared to do are the things, are the real things that matter, when it really, at the end of the day, like, I mean, they are, like, I'm not going to say that associating, isn't the freedom. Like I said, it's like what makes us Americans, but truly, like, your your relationship with with God is what is who you are. Like that's
Right.
the main thing. And I think when we're distracted by all this other stuff, like we're worried about who the person here in the world that we're talking to or not talking to. We're not thinking about like that still voice, that
Yep.
still small voice that's always there, that's asking for us to stop for a second and just be present and quiet. And we just get distracted in all these temporal battles. So it's very, I think, very evil in that sense. It's not just a temporal battle; it's a spiritual one.
Right. And the New Testament tells us, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. The Pharisee said, oh, hey, Lord, who's my neighbor? Right. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's the whole premise of that teaching is one, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and spirit, and then to love thy neighbor as thyself. And this fits into the solution of parallel economy, parallel society, your community. We have to observe the masses and do the opposite. The masses
Mhm.
are divide and conquer. The masses are
Mhm.
barricade yourself in your house and virtually live through social media and tribalize up, and wave whichever flag that your team's on and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
the solution is find out who your neighbors are, get out into your community, help and love on your neighbor, help some elderly person in your community,
Mhm.
provide for them, develop like a barter or exchange system. These are the types of solutions that are real and practical. And not only that, they literally facilitate, loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and loving thy neighbor as thyself. Sacrifice for your neighbor, sacrifice, give to your community, and help them out. And you know what? Maybe I promise you there's people in our neighborhood and in our community that have incredibly different views and opinions than we do. And we work together and we help these people, and um that unifies us, and that
Mhm.
it really like quells the whole hate speech thing.
Mhm. Right, because you you've now gotten to know somebody, and when you read an article about that kind of person, you're gonna go, "Well, wait a second, I know Jane or Joe, like,
Hmm.
they voted that way or they thought this, but they're some of the nicest people I've ever met." And that's one of, I think, the only ways to really change people's minds through relationship, which is,
Yeah.
again, why I was saying, like, this whole idea of guilt by association is so dangerous because it is the only way to turn things around. Is like that we start getting to know people and have real relationships where we can check the propaganda because we know it to be false because we have experimented. We've done the experiment ourselves. Like we got to know that person,
Right.
and we they're not what they're not what the media says. And I just think this whole like divide and conquer, keep people inside, it's so, and now like the internet kicking people off. Um, yeah, it's intentional to, I think, so that then all you have is what the official narrative is. You don't have any other narrative because you're not living one. There's just like
Yeah.
there's nothing else for you to believe. You don't have any other life other than what you're being spoon fed. And yeah, it's sad, but I don't want to say like I've always been aware of this stuff. For a long time, I was definitely one of those people, which is I think one of the reasons why I do what I do now is, in a lot of ways I'm trying to understand how I woke up and why I was asleep for so long. Like what was it about me and my personality that bought this stuff? And, I think one of the real traps, even if you've started to like you're red pilled and you're out, or you're starting to wake up, is that you hang on to, well, first off, that you hang on to resentment towards like where you came from, or the others, whoever your others are, you're hanging on to that anger. And number two, to think somehow now you can't be fooled again. Like if you think
Right.
you're out and you are never going to be able to be manipulated again, you're never going to suffer the same or the possibility that you could suffer the same naivety, then you probably will. You will do that again. Hopefully, when you start waking up, you realize, man, I can be duped, and then
Yeah.
because you live with that, you are less likely to do so because you're on guard for it, instead of thinking that you're not like those other people now, or the way you used to be, and you don't have to think about that at all anymore. You don't have to worry about that at all anymore.
What's another scriptural principle, right? Humility and just being humble. Don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. You know, we're all
Yeah.
fallible, we're all human, and we're all capable of error. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. We're easily deceived, we're easily manipulated, and once you realize that, you'll have more humility to be able to interact, you know, with without vitriol or viciousness or being ugly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that's why, yeah, a lot of this is really, it's much bigger than what I think we often argue about. And so, yeah, I'm glad we talked about that, because it's true. Like, I've also said to people that I think when I was a reporter, one of the things that guided my interest in sitting with people who, like I said, that I like, the kind of people I still do, you know, I like, who would be outside of the norm, and some who would be very outside the norm, is that if I could see that, given their life, like if I was born to their parents, or I had their upbringing, or I had gone through the same experiences, like, is it possible that I could have done what they did? And I mean, if you're going to be honest with yourself, you have to say yes. Yes, if I was raised by their parents, or I grew up in this situation, like, I could do something that bad. That to me is like the only honest answer. Then how can you possibly judge someone from, especially a spiritual level? Like, how can you look at them as if you're any better? You can't, because the only difference is that you had your parents and you were born in this particular time and place, and that's not something to be proud of. You know, that just happened. You're lucky. You know, you're
Yeah.
lucky you didn't end up where they are. So, like, learn from that and be aware that if the circumstances are right, you know, for you to do something terribly evil, you have the capacity to do it too. So be on guard, and don't think that, you know, only some kinds of people could do something like that. I fully believe all of us are capable of doing the worst possible things.
Well, this has been an excellent conversation.
Yeah.
And appreciate your time. Allison, before we wrap this up, where can folks find you at?
Well, I have the most fun with people on Locals. I think that's where I spend most of my time. Sorry, I'm losing my voice because I'm sick too. Oh, and the kid's coming in. She's going to start crying again. So let's wrap this up. Locals, alsamara.locals.com. But I'm everywhere. I mean, if you're still on YouTube, you can find me on YouTube. I'm on Rockfin, Rumble. But Locals is where I think I talk to people the most.
Alrighty.
What happened?
Well, Allison, thank you so much.